Hey everybody, Trey here. Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. As you may remember, last year I uploaded a video in which I took you out with me on a storm chase in southern Oklahoma, in which we saw a nice tornadic supercell at night. I took you through my thought process in terms of targeting, positioning relative to the storm, and some of the unique features and behaviors of the storm that we saw out in the field. That video got a really nice response, and I do plan on doing some more of those chase vlogs in the future. But as you know, in storm chasing, there's a lot to keep track of, so recording all of those vlog clips while out in the field actively chasing was quite difficult. But I do have a ton of storm chasing footage just sitting on my hard drive, so I thought what could be a nice way to convey the same information as a chase vlog without the added distraction of having to record the clips out in the field would be to take my full raw footage from certain chases and insert my commentary over the top of the video, including things like why I targeted where I did, my thought process on positioning, and explaining some unique storm features and behaviors that you see on your screen. Again, I do plan on doing some more chase vlogs in the future, but this kind of video could be something we do on a more frequent basis that still conveys the same information to help you become a better chaser. So let me know what you think in the comments below. If you like this kind of video, we'll definitely do some more of these in the future. Today we're going to dive into one of my favorite chases from last year, and that is the beautiful, dusty tornado near Kimball, Nebraska on June 28th, 2023. As you may know, I am a guide for a tornado tour company, and this was our last tour of the season, so it was nice to close out the season with a bang and treat our guests to a close-range intercept of a beautiful tornado over open fields. So again, I'll be going through our thought process behind why we targeted where we did and how we were able to end up in such a great spot next to this tornado. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. First, I want to give you a little bit of insight into the forecast for this day and our mindset in terms of selecting a target. This was one of those classic late spring, early summer days in the high plains where you have only subtle flow aloft and have to rely much more on terrain influences to get the job done. Starting off at 500 millibars, we have just broad troughing parked across the west coast with ridging over the plains. In between these two areas, we had a belt of modestly enhanced 30 to 40 knot west-southwesterly flow, which in these cases is often enough to initiate storms with the help of terrain. Models were hinting at very subtle perturbations moving through this belt of flow. You can see some ripples in the height contours develop as the day progressed, in particular this one over southeast Wyoming into northeast Colorado. At the surface, a cold front was slowly sagging southward across the central plains, leaving much of Wyoming, Nebraska, and Colorado in northerly flow. These winds were expected to change to easterly by afternoon, as is often the case in these post-frontal regimes, and that's exactly what happened. This is what we call upslope flow, as the winds flow up the higher terrain, creating enhanced lift that can initiate thunderstorms if the other ingredients are in place. The low-level easterly flow beneath enhanced west-southwesterly mid-level flow yielded ample deep-layer shear for supercells, and given somewhat muted background forcing, the storm mode was expected to be quite discreet. We began the day with low 60s dew points pooled in northeast Colorado, and those were forecast to inch northward into southeast Wyoming and western Nebraska by afternoon. This is upper echelon moisture for the region and is akin to something like upper 60s to low 70s dew points in the much lower terrain to the east. With ample clearing in place by early afternoon, isolated supercells were expected to fire along the higher terrain areas of eastern Wyoming, with the most intense storms expected to take place within the area of elevated moisture from southeast Wyoming into western Nebraska. This scenario was supported by high-res guidance as well, and the SPC outlined a small, slight risk centered on this area in their morning outlook. Large to very large hail and damaging winds were expected to be the main threats. Given that we had fairly weak low-level flow, we thought the tornado threat would be quite low, but in these setups, the complex terrain can help compensate for a lack of ambient low-level shear to yield a non-zero tornado risk. With all this in mind, we decided to target southeast Wyoming in search of just a nice supercell for our tour guests, and by late morning we hit the road from our hotel in Ogallala, Nebraska en route to our target of LaGrange, Wyoming. We arrived in LaGrange around 1 to 2 p.m. and set up shop in the town park with an expansive view to our west. We watched as numerous attempts at robust convection went up but quickly dissipated before one updraft in particular began to explode and rapidly develop into a cumulonimbus with a broad base. I'll let my raw footage play from here, over which I'll be inserting some occasional commentary on our thought process and some breakdowns of what you're seeing on your screen. So we decided to go west and then south out of LaGrange to get a closer view of this storm, and this was really our first close approach to this storm, and you could tell that it was going to be something pretty interesting. When you see it develop a big, broad, flat base like this with some lowered areas starting to develop as you see here, you can tell that the storm is surface-based and rapidly strengthening. So we knew this was going to be our main storm of interest, at least for the time being. At this point, it had gotten quite turbulent underneath the base, lots of lower fragments, but still very little rotation, mostly just right to left motion across the screen, which indicates a lot of outflow, as evidenced by the dust blowing from right to left underneath the little tail cloud feature you see in this clip.
It's got a very good, well-defined tail cloud on it, though.
Now this is when things start to get pretty interesting. Notice this horseshoe-shaped cut out of the base. That is a clear slot, which is evidence of a rear flank downdraft. So now the supercell is starting to produce an RFD, and as we know, RFD is a critical component of supercell tornadogenesis. We're also seeing some low-level rotation develop as well. You can see the spin in the clouds there. It's no longer moving just right to left. It's starting to actually spin there at the cloud base, which means we are in business. The RFD is starting to make its presence felt. We're still battling a lot of outflow. You can see the dust underneath the rotation. There is dust underneath the rotation, but it is only moving outward right to left across the screen. So there's probably not quite enough rear flank downdraft yet to balance out the outflow from the forward flank precipitation core as well as the inflow. But the storm was clearly getting its act together as it was developing a very nice presentation on radar, very well-defined hook echo on the southwest flank.
We're not too sure to see these small features.
I just want to say it was not. Yeah, but it needs pressure distance, right?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Here's a little gustnado that we saw out in the field just off to our southwest. I see a lot of these reported as tornadoes during the season, but you have to make sure it's underneath an area of strong rotation aloft and not being caused by or on the leading edge of outflow. In this case, as you saw in the previous clips, there was rotation at cloud base, but it was very, very weak. So the storm was not really ready to be tornadic yet. And also you can see the outflow dust surrounding this vortex, so it was clearly being caused by outflow. It was also rotating very, very weakly. In a tornado, you'd probably see much stronger rotation here within this vortex. So this was certainly a gustnado. If we were seeing really strong rotation aloft, we'd be having a different discussion.
Carved out, you can see how
Well-defined bowl-shaped area where the RFD was wrapping around the mesocyclone, where our occlusion is located, but again, a lot of outflow as evidenced by the dust, likely going to undercut that circulation here in just a few minutes.
Quickly position.
Now that RFD cut and occlusion were much less obvious, likely being undercut by all that strong outflow, we also started to see the hook echo transition into more of a dogleg shape on radar, meaning that the outflow was surging out and was kind of winning the battle. So when the storm is doing this, when it's trying to recycle, that's when you want to reposition. When the storm's cycling, trying to get its act back together, that's when you want to make your move in order to be in position for the new attempt at tornadogenesis. So reposition is what we did. We knew the storm needed some time to recycle and it was taking a pretty hard dive to the southeast, so we wanted to get ahead of it, give it some space, and put ourselves in position for the next cycle. We headed south toward Pine Bluffs, Wyoming before turning eastbound on I-80 toward Bushnell, Nebraska. As we pulled off on the exit south of Bushnell, the storm began to intensify again and rotation ramped up significantly. We knew we had to make a decision in order to continue the chase south of I-80, where the road network degrades significantly. We could head south and then east from Bushnell, battling unknown dirt roads but staying much closer to the supercell's area of interest, or continue east on I-80 toward Kimball, eventually dropping south on Highway 71, the only paved road south of the interstate. This option would keep us on high-quality roads but take us much farther away from the storm. Given that the storm was diving hard southeast but moving relatively slowly, the fact that the storm appeared to have completed its cycle and was ready to attempt tornado genesis, and the fact that our tour vans are equipped to handle some degree of off-roading, we decided to take the gamble on the roads south of Bushnell, putting ourselves much closer to the developing circulation. This proved to be a pivotal decision in the outcome of our chase. As we started to head south, that carved-out area made its return as the rear-flank downdraft gust front began to wrap around and constrict the low-level mesocyclone. You can see the clouds kind of swirling into that bowl-shaped lowering. That is likely the leading edge of the rear-flank downdraft gust front, leading into the low-level mesocyclone that was beginning to constrict. And as you'll see here, we start to get the development of a funnel cloud. So we're starting to see a better balance between the outflow and inflow with this storm, and this was our first really good attempt at tornado genesis.
That, isn't it?
Yep, right there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, thank you.
Not done yet. Just watching that spot.
Right there.
Yep. Right where the funnel just like trying to come down again.
That was the funnel.
Yeah. Yes, that was a definite funnel. That was a big funnel. That might have even been a tornado. We just can't see the circulation over there.
By this point, the funnel had dissipated, but you could tell the storm was far from done as we still had a very stout bowl-shaped lowering with rotation, as well as a well-defined RFD cut.
I almost have a second occlusion off to the right.
Yeah.
Scary. Very careful when you go.
By now, we once again had lost that well-defined RFD cut and bowl lowering. There was still a little bit of a funnel that remained, you can see in the center portion of your screen there, but the overall area of interest, those well-defined features that we talked about earlier, had gotten a lot messier over the last few minutes, which probably meant a combination of the RFD wrapping fully around the circulation and occluding it, and some more issues with that aggressive outflow. So the storm was certainly cycling at this point, but we were still watching that remnant funnel. Notice the uptick in close lightning as evidenced by the loud thunder you've been hearing. That generally means the storm, and more specifically the mesocyclone, is strengthening.
Yeah.
We decided to reposition south as this storm was cycling. It was apparent that this storm may be trying to change character to tornadic, so we wanted to be as proactive as possible on the poor road network south of the interstate and give it some space before it tried its next attempt. We still had a little bit of a funnel though from that remnant area of interest, and we spotted some ground circulation underneath it, so we believe we had a brief tornado here. Tornado. Let's stop. And you guys see the funnel still there at 3 o'clock? And then there's a swirl underneath. That's a tornado. This was a lot different than the earlier gustnado we saw, which had much weaker rotation. You can see in this vortex we have much more rapid rotation, and it apparently was connected to the funnel above, which was leading right down to it. So we believe this to be a brief tornado, so we were pretty excited to be on the board for the day. Here's another brief tornado we saw as we were repositioning. Yeah. Right there. That's real good motion. Look at that, guys. 1 o'clock.
Could be a tornado.
Could be a tornado. Notice the rapid rising motion within the vortex. That is not something a gustnado would possess. As we know, tornadoes have very intense vertical motion within them, which is evidence that they are attached to the mesocyclone. This vortex had that in spades, and so this was very likely a brief tornado. It's up. Strong motion. This is when things started to get really interesting. Take a look at the rapid rotation in the base, which is something we hadn't seen from this storm yet. This means that the low-level mesocyclone is really starting to crank. When you see rapid carouseling motion like this, that's usually a sign that a tornado is imminent. Notice the rain curtains wrapping around the mesocyclone. That's usually an indication of a developing circulation, and sure enough, we have our first evidence of ground circulation beneath a bowl-shaped funnel, so we have a tornado in progress. There it is, there it is. Dirt swirl, tornado in progress. Close, yeah. Here's a great example of an inflow jet feeding into the base of the vortex. Just goes to show you how strong and turbulent that flow is in proximity to the vortex at ground level. Wow. It's gonna be close. Get ready. Holy shit. my God. Hold on. Get ready. In the vans now, in the vans, in the vans. The tornado was not moving right to left across our field of view. It was coming right at us, so we needed to inch just a little bit off to the east to get out of its path. And so we repositioned, and this is some footage from my fellow tour guide, Stephen Jones, who was in our second van right behind us, filming out the back toward the tornado as we repositioned. Are you on tripod, Ben? Huh? Are you on tripod? Can you get some of the group? Wow. Still going on the right. After the tornado crossed the road and began to weaken, we once again repositioned to the east, trying to get back to the main highway, Highway 71, which again is the only paved road south of Kimball, before the storm plunged into an even worse road network in extreme northeast Colorado. As we were doing so, a new circulation developed right in front of us with the remnant circulation of the old tornado off to our south. You have to have your head on a swivel near and underneath these mesocyclones, especially in the central high plains where a lot of these setups are fueled by strong, low-level vorticity, and thus little vortices like this can develop at any time. This tornado appeared to be weak, so we knew we could make a close approach, with caution of course.
Come towards us.
This one is very weak. Yeah, this one's a weak one. We're in good shape.
Film it, film it. Jeez, a little bit simple. Look at this. Huh?
Take a look at the textbook multiple vortices orbiting around the tornado. Fun fact, the power poles and the fenced-off area you see there are actually part of an underground intercontinental ballistic missile silo, and the tornado went directly over that, so pretty cool to see this out in the middle of nowhere, rural Nebraska. Spin up right there. Yeah, another spin up. Here's some radar imagery of the supercell as it produced the tornado. You can see that it developed a very tight couplet that persisted for several scans. After our intercept, the fastest and really only way to keep up with this storm was to drop south on Highway 71 all the way to Colorado Highway 14, which would take us to the I-76 corridor. By the time we pulled in front of the storm again, the tornado threat had subsided, but we were able to get some hail for our tour guests near Iliff, Colorado. It was a nice way to wrap up an incredible chase day. It's not often you get to experience a beautiful tornado over open fields from that close of a range. I'm definitely glad we decided to go south and then east from Bushnell initially, instead of all the way east and then south, as we would have had a much more distant view of the tornado when it occurred. Hopefully this video gave you some insight into my thought process when actively chasing. Again, if you like this kind of video, please let me know in the comments below and we'll do some more of these in the future. Also, I wanted to extend a big thank you to my fellow tour guides on that tour, Max Olson, Stephen Jones, and Ben McCone. Our decision-making that day was a group effort, and we were able to execute our close-range intercept safely and successfully thanks to their input. If you're ever interested in chasing and learning about severe storms meteorology with us, head on over to extremetornadotours.com. With that, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.